Welcome everyone to another edition of Mac Break. I'm Steve and I'm here with my buddy Mark, and we're excited to show you all the new features of the Final Cut Pro 11.1 update. It's good to see you, Mark.
You too, Steve. Always good to see you. Glad to be back here. Glad to have another release of Final Cut Pro. This is not a major update, but there are several cool new features and we've got all the deets for you. So let's just jump right in. First up, nothing is useful.
Well, let me tell you, doing nothing is not as easy as it looks.
So take, for example, the lowly gap clip. It's nothing. It has nothing in it. It seems to do nothing, but it turns out to be very, very useful in all kinds of places when editing in Final Cut Pro. Here I'm using to adjust the timing that this clip comes in underneath this title. So nothing can be very useful. So Apple thought, why not come up with another nothing clip? So if we go to the edit menu, there is a brand new adjustment clip with a nice keyboard shortcut, Option A. I'll drop it in here. What's an adjustment clip? It's nothing. By default, it does nothing, but it's very useful. Now, a lot of you guys might recognize this and be like, wait a minute, didn't you guys come out with one of these? Yeah, we did. 12 years ago, we made one. And 6 years ago, we showed you how to make your own. And we also have one free on our website. But now Apple's taken and put it directly in Final Cut Pro. And there are a couple of advantages to having it directly in Final Cut Pro. First of all, if you're not totally sure what an adjustment clip does, basically anything you add to it, either effects or transformations, get applied to the clips beneath it. So here we have a series of clips, and the adjustment clip isn't doing anything, but for instance, with it selected, if we go to our color inspector and we desaturate, everything comes desaturated. I'll turn that off. Or if you add an effect from the effects browser, I'll go to our color grading presets and use one of the new color grading presets, more on that later, throw it on here, everything gets affected. I'll undo that. Or if you go to the video inspector, and let's say we crop the top and the bottom, we can quickly create a letterbox effect across everything. And the cool thing about this is that your clips are still adjustable within that letterbox. I can move this clip up and down in X and Y to reposition it. So all the things that you know that you can do with the adjustment layer as a third-party product or that you built yourself using Motion, you can now do with the one built into Final Cut Pro. Notice how its color differs from a regular title. If we go to the timeline index to the roles tab, we can see that these adjustment clips have their own default role. You can also see that by right-clicking, choosing Assign Video Role, and you'll see the new role adjustment clips. That's kind of cool, can make them easy to find, easy to solo, easy to disable. But here's another very cool thing. I'm going to delete this. If you know you want to apply an effect to an adjustment layer, you don't need to apply the adjustment layer first. In the effects browser, select the effect that you want, and then just press the keyboard shortcut for the adjustment layer, Option A. Doing so adds the adjustment layer and adds the effect to the adjustment layer. Not only that, notice that the name of the effect is applied to the adjustment layer. This did not happen when we applied the adjustment layer by itself. So this is a great way to apply an adjustment layer and see exactly what effect is applied, assuming, of course, you've just applied one. Finally, the nice thing about having this built in is if you're sharing a library with somebody else, there's no need to consolidate your Motion templates inside the library or send those Motion templates separate since it's built in now. So nothing is new and nothing is nice.
This is what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object.
In Final Cut, the immovable object is a marker and the unstoppable force is progress. Now, up until this release, if you wanted your marker to be in a different location, you had to delete it, perhaps copy the name of that marker, and then create a new one and paste in the name of it. Finally, we can now drag our markers to move them to different locations. Amazing. And if you drag it off a clip, it disappears. I'll undo that. You can still nudge your markers, markers, nudge marker left or right, keyboard shortcuts. That's not new. Just the ability to drag them is new. Can you drag them to another clip? No. Can you drag them Command B across a bladed clip? No. You can just drag them within the range of one clip. This ability to move a marker applies to our standard marker type, the to-do markers, And what I think is most useful is the chapter markers. The reason for that is I frequently find that I have a chapter marker on some new section, and I find I might need to trim that section, and historically you do that and your chapter marker is gone. It's not really gone. It's still there. You can see it in the timeline index here, and you trim it. It disappears from the timeline index, but it's still there. But it won't be useful. You can't export with it. Now, you can move that marker, which is fantastic. Love it. By the way, if you don't recognize what this is for, this little pin identifies the frame that will be used when showing the chapter markers. So this is the first book I wrote about motion back in 2005. That's right, 20 years ago. In fact, here's a picture of my son when he was a baby. He's almost 21. And here on page 115, using markers, you can move them. Come on. Not only have they been around since motion first came out 20 years ago, if you double click on a marker, you can assign it a different color. And when you remove it, you get this cool animation and a little sound, which you don't get in Final Cut. Still, I'm glad to see the unstoppable force of progress, no matter how long it takes, finally hitting our immovable object and giving us movable markers. Next up.
Better, stronger, faster.
If you've checked out my brand new masking in Final Cut Pro tutorial, you'll know how powerful the magnetic mask is, especially when combined with other masking features in Final Cut. If you haven't, you should definitely check it out. But now, in Final Cut Pro 11.1, the magnetic mask is better, faster, stronger. I'll duplicate this clip, apply a magnetic mask with Control Command M, select this motorcyclist, and attempt to deselect the spokes. Check the mask, analyze, done. Go to our effects browser. I'm gonna go to all, look for comic, apply comic basic, choose a grayscale, and in seconds we have an incredible selection that did not select the spokes, so we see the normal colors through those spokes. And you'll see in my tutorial, which was based on the pre-Final Cut Pro 11.1 version, that it was definitely more difficult to make this accurate a selection. Still possible, but more difficult. So I can tell how much better it is, and I see that it analyzes faster, and overall a great improvement to a really cool and super feature that was introduced in the last version of Final Cut Pro. There's also a bunch of new content in this release.
Cool beans.
Specifically in the titles browser under dynamic titles, there are now 9 additional dynamic title sets, each one consisting of 4 different titles: bumper, title, title over footage, and title with footage, bringing the total to 17 title sets. And a couple of these are pretty cool. I want to show you shape masking. I have the title with footage version here over this first clip, and the only thing I've changed is the text and nothing else. You can, of course, change the fonts and the colors and everything, but I wanted to point out a couple of these on-screen controls because they allow you to adjust not only the window that reveals the footage, but also both the position and the scale of the footage in that window can be adjusted. And that position and scaling changes will revert by the time the title is finished. So now that I play this, I've been able to recenter and scale my subject to fit within that frame. But once the title's over, we're back to the original 100% scale and 0 change to position. Sliding box works similarly. I'll take title with footage here and add it as a connected clip. And by default, it has a pretty good setup already, but I'm free to adjust the position and scale of this content. And even the bounding box containing it can be adjusted. So for example, I could do something like that, and I could move the text up here. And by the time it's done, everything scales back to normal proportions. So a couple really cool, interesting, and very adjustable titles in this package. In addition, there are 3 new transitions to go along with some of those new titles. And in the effects browser, under color grading presets, there are 12 new color grading presets, bringing the total to 71, if you can believe that. Okay, for this last feature, I really struggled to come up with a good demonstration and a good use case. So I want to show you in this project, I've used everything we've done so far. So I've used one of the new titles from the Dynamic Titles collection. I've used the adjustment clip with the keyboard shortcut so you can see the name of the color grading preset that I've applied to all these clips. I've got a marker where I wanted to add a freeze frame, which I can move freely to exactly the frame that I want. I've used magnetic mask to isolate our motorcycle jumper, and I've used the comic effect on him. And there's the freeze frame. So let's say for this shot, when he comes up and freezes, he or she, I should say, and we have a title, I'd like to also show the award that they were giving. There was a trophy, and I don't have a shot of it. So I just want to use a placeholder. And I think that's a great use case for Image Playground. And if you're not familiar with Image Playground, it's an app that Apple released recently. It requires macOS 15.2 or later on at least an M1 Mac. So it has to be on an Apple Silicon Mac. And you'll see it in your applications folder. And you may have played with it, you may not have. It's an AI generation type of app. But it's now integrated into Final Cut Pro. What that means is if we go back to Final Cut, under File, Import, we have the option to launch Image Playground so that we can create an image and import it directly into Final Cut. You can also find it under the Import button, and you can see there's a keyboard shortcut for it, Option Shift P. I'm going to ask it to make an image of a trophy. And it'll give you a few. If you wait, it keeps giving you a few more options. You can keep adding words to try to make it different. I want it on a plain background. I want to get rid of the background. So I'm going to say plain green background. And it will add that. And since I'm just using this as a placeholder, I don't care too much about how perfect the image is. Let's say I'm going to use that. I'll click Done. It automatically adds it to my selected event. So let's go ahead and add it to our project right here. I'm going to press X to set a range on this title that exactly matches where I want this to go. Select the trophy, Q for Connect Edit. And now let's key it out. So in the effects browser under Mask and Keying, I'm going to throw the green screen keyer on this. And it does a pretty good job right away. I'm actually going to set the strength down to 0 and sample the color instead. Turn off my transform control, create a couple samples. And then I'll also add a draw mask to it just to garbage mat out all the other stuff there. There we go. I'll go to my transform, scale it down, and put it over there. It has a little transparency in there. That's okay. And if we play that through now, I've got a little outdoor adventures string out. That all has a similar look and feel thanks to the adjustment clip. We've got a freeze frame based on our movable marker. We've got a nice new title from the new title collection, a very good magnetic mask from the upgraded magnetic mask, and a placeholder image from Image Playground.
In this section, I'm going to show you perhaps one of the coolest audio reverb plugins you'll ever play with. It's called the Quantec Room Simulator, or QRS for short. It was introduced in Logic Pro 11.1 and is now available in Final Cut Pro 11.1. There's a really interesting backstory to this plugin, which I'll get into once I apply it to one of my clips. Open the effects browser and select the Spaces category. In the Logic section, you'll see the Quantec Room Simulator listed at the top. I'll drag it onto this piano clip. In the Audio Inspector, locate the effect and click this button to open the UI. By clicking the Quantec logo, a floating window opens that gives you a synopsis of the reverb's history. In short, the QRS first appeared in 1982 as the brainchild of German inventor Wolfgang Buchleitner, who developed the first algorithmic reverb to authentically simulate the acoustics of a room. Using Buchleitner's original schematics and code, Apple's engineers faithfully reproduced both his original QRS and the updated Yardstick version, which featured all digital processing and improved algorithms. As Final Cut Pro video editors, we now have access to the same technology that's been used on countless recordings and feature films. Let's take a look at how it works. When it comes to using any reverb, including this one, my approach is to start with one of the built-in presets until I find one that sounds good, then adjust as needed. With the playhead over the clip, press X to mark a range and turn on looping by pressing Command L. Press the / key to begin looped playback. Using the preset menu, choose from small, medium, and large rooms. I'll audition some medium rooms, starting with Banquet Hall. Use the arrow button to advance to the next reverb in the list. Each preset will produce a different sound relative to the room acoustics it's simulating. I like this countryside church reverb. The two most important controls for determining how much reverb will result are the reverb time dial and the room size slider. In order to better understand how these controls work together, I'll drag the dry level slider all the way to the left. At this position, the dry signal is mute. The dry slider controls how much of the original unprocessed audio is mixed in with the reverb. With the dry level set to mute, you are now hearing just the isolated reverb, so you can more easily discern what the reverb is doing when you make your adjustments. I'll drag the reverb time dial to 100 milliseconds. At this setting, we barely hear any reverb. If I set this dial to 10, you'll hear what it sounds like when the signal returns to the source 10 seconds later. Obviously, this is an extreme setting. I'll set this to a more reasonable 1 second reverb time. The room size also affects the reverb time. Drag the room size slider to the left for a smaller room, and the reverb time will adjust accordingly. In this case, the maximum reverb time available is 2 seconds, and that would make sense in the real world. The smaller the room, the shorter the reverb time. By increasing the room size, the reverb time will adjust to accommodate the larger space. For example, I can now set the reverb time as high as 50 seconds. I'll set the room size back to the middle and the reverb time back to 1 second. Now I'll reintroduce the dry signal back into the mix. I'll set this to -9 dB. Another slider that is unique to the QRS is the first reflection slider. Unlike other reverbs that only have wet and dry mix sliders, this slider isolates the first reflection from the main reverb signal, allowing you to boost its level, giving the reverb more punch. Let's listen to a before and after. Great! Final Cut Pro 11.1 also gives you the ability to give your audio effects custom names. I'll select the music clip, then double-click the effect name in the inspector and enter Church QRS. Just below the piano, I've connected a crowd applause sound effect. I'll enable it and disable the piano. This particular sound has no discernible reverb to my ear. It sounds like it was recorded in a studio. Since this crowd sound is supposed to exist in the same room as the piano, I'll copy the church QRS effect to it by moving the playhead over the piano clip so that the effect is visible in the inspector. I'll then drag it on top of the sound effect to apply it. Playing the clip back, it now has the same room characteristics as the piano. I'll re-enable the piano and play them both together. Moving over to the next clip of Kate, this clip was recorded in my living room using a dynamic microphone. Playing back, it sounds fairly dry due to all the padded furniture and the carpet in the room.
I know you haven't made your mind up yet, but I would never do you wrong.
I'll add the QRS effect to the clip, then apply the club preset from the medium room group. I want to give Kate's voice an ethereal sound. I'll crank up the room size and the reverb level to the max and set the reverb time to 100 seconds. I'll use the dry level slider to determine how much of Kate's voice I want discernible.
I'd go hungry, I'd go black.
I prefer less, so I'll set this in the middle. At the end of the clip, there's no reverb tail because the clip has been cut right after her last note. To address this, I'll move the playhead to the last frame of the clip and press Shift-H to create a hold frame. I'll drag out the hold frame to extend it, then play back again.
To make you feel mine.
I now have a reverb ring out. Here are a couple of workflow enhancements that I think you'll find very useful. The first one has to do with locating the source angle of a multicam clip or a synchronized clip so that you can edit it back into the timeline as a connected clip. So why would I want to do this, you may be asking? Well, let me show you. Here I have a timeline open of a 3-angle multicam edit. Let's say that I wanted to stabilize this POV shot of the desert terrain. It's been a long-standing issue that you cannot stabilize a multicam clip. Previously, you had to go through this elaborate process of stepping into the angle editor, match framing the angle, marking an endpoint, returning to the parent timeline, marking the timeline angle, then performing a 3-point connect edit. Once you did all this, you could then select the connected clip and apply stabilization to it. Let's look at the Final Cut Pro 11.1 way to do this in far less steps. Move the playhead over the frame you want to match frame to and press Shift-F. Doing this selects the multicam clip in the browser. Now press Shift-F a second time and the original source angle is matched to, and a selection range is pre-marked for you. Before I edit this angle into the timeline, I'll press Shift-2 for a video-only edit, then press Q to connect it above the angle in the timeline. The last step is to enable stabilization. Here's full frame playback with the stabilized clip. The next tip I have for you is using Compressor to perform high-quality frame retiming using machine learning. You can convert to high frame rates from 60 frames per second all the way up to 120 frames per second. And because AI is involved, the end result looks spectacular. In Compressor 4.10, I have a movie that I sent from Final Cut Pro. Selecting the job reveals that the native frame rate is 30 frames per second. From the Presets panel, I'll add a ProRes preset to the job. In the Video Inspector, I'll set the frame rate to 120 frames per second. I'll then set the location to the Movies folder and start the encoding. Once completed, I'll open the movie and play back. The movie plays back silky smooth, with no visual artifacts I can detect. So if you need a bunch of movies to be converted to a higher frame rate, Compressor gets the job done.
Final Cut Pro for iPad now has a very cool new portrait layout, which can make the iPad easier to hold and the interface easier to work with depending on what you're doing. It particularly works well when working with a vertical project. In this example, I'm using one of the new titles and using the on-screen controls to manipulate the content. All the new content on the Mac is also available on the iPad, plus more. The purple dots here indicate new content. In Effects, we have the 12 new color grading presets we saw on the Mac. In Transitions, the 3 that are part of the new dynamic titles. In Titles, the 9 new dynamic title sets. As with all these, everything new is at the top, but it's also included in the categories below. And in Soundtracks, exclusive to the iPad, are 40 new Flex Music tracks in 4 new categories: Chill, Epic, Mysterious, and Retro. Remember, these dynamically adjust when you trim them in a project, and you can of course move projects containing them over to Final Cut Pro on the Mac. If you use a keyboard with your iPad, there are several new keyboard shortcuts, including Replace with Gap, Overwrite to Primary Storyline, Lift from Primary Storyline, Nudge Left Many, Nudge Right Many, and Import from Image Playground, which means, of course, Image Playground is now available from the Import menu, just as with Final Cut Pro on the Mac, and anything you create is added to the browser automatically.
So there it is, all the features of Final Cut 11.1. Tell us what you think in the comments.
Please subscribe if you haven't already, and check us out at rippletraining.com. We've got a ton of tutorials and plugins on Final Cut Pro and related applications.
We'll see you next time.